In a world that could collapse at any moment, the clock is ticking, and the question isn't if disaster will strike, but when. A global collapse, whether caused by nuclear war, societal breakdown, a pandemic, or a complete blackout, might seem like a far-off, apocalyptic scenario. But here's the truth: it could happen faster than you think. And when it does, everything you've taken for granted, every convenience, every assumption, will shatter in an instant. We like to think we're prepared. We've got our bug-out bags, our backup generators, our stash of canned food. But what if I told you that most people are preparing for the wrong things? What if I told you that your survival hinges on science so critical, so hidden, that no one is talking about it? This is the secret science of surviving a global collapse, the stuff that nobody tells you, and the stuff you need to understand if you want to make it out alive. Let's start with something you've probably never considered: the science of your body during total collapse. In a collapsed world, you're not going to be fighting wild animals or bandits right away. Your greatest enemy will be your own biology. In the absence of power, clean water, and food, your body will begin to deteriorate faster than you can imagine. After 72 hours without water, your kidneys begin to shut down, and you're hit with intense dehydration. But here's the thing that nobody warns you about: your body doesn't just need water, it needs the right kind of water. A simple bottle of purified water from your emergency stash won't cut it. You need electrolytes, you need minerals. And in an emergency, where clean water is scarce, salt will be your best friend. It might sound crazy, but the science of dehydration tells us that without the proper balance of salt and water, your cells will collapse long before you even feel thirsty. Here's where things get really interesting: if you don't know how to filter or properly purify water, your body won't just struggle, it could start poisoning itself. In a post-collapse world, all water sources become contaminated with bacteria, parasites, and, yes, chemicals. Simple filtration methods, like using sand and charcoal in a DIY filter, will help, but only if you understand how to build one correctly. Many preppers overlook this simple yet crucial step, thinking that a store-bought filter will suffice. The truth is, not all filters are created equal, and in a collapse, this mistake can cost you your life. But it's not just your body's hydration that's at risk, it's your entire metabolism. Without access to refrigeration, fresh produce will spoil quickly. Your stash of food will turn into a pile of rotten, inedible mush. The secret here is food preservation science. There's an old-school technique that most people overlook: fermentation. It's not just for making kombucha. Fermentation is one of the oldest preservation methods known to humankind. By fermenting fruits, vegetables, and even meat, you're not only preserving them, but you're also boosting their nutritional value. The beneficial bacteria in fermented foods help maintain your gut health, which is essential when your immune system is under stress. You might be wondering, how can I start fermenting in a post-collapse world where everything is chaotic? It's simple. Fermenting requires just a few basic tools: a clean jar, salt, and access to food that can be fermented. Salt is key here, too. In fact, salt's preservation properties are so potent that it could become the currency of a post-collapse society. Why? Because it's a critical resource, and when things collapse, you're going to need as much of it as you can get. Now, let's talk about energy, or, more accurately, the lack of it. When the power grid goes down, everything that relies on electricity stops working. But survival doesn't stop when the lights go out. You need to know how to produce your own energy in a world where the grid is gone forever. You might think a solar panel will save you, but here's the real science behind solar power in a collapse. It's not just about having a solar panel, it's about having the right kind of battery to store the energy you produce. And that's where most people fail. Without a durable, reliable way to store energy, you'll quickly find that your solar setup is useless when the sun isn't shining. What's the solution? DIY energy storage. The science behind creating your own battery banks is surprisingly simple, and it's something nobody talks about. You need to understand the basics of deep cycle batteries, how to wire them together, and how to properly charge them with alternative sources of power. Wind turbines, solar panels, even a hand-cranked generator, they all serve a purpose. But if you don't know how to store that energy for long-term use, you're going to find yourself in the dark, literally and figuratively. Now, let's get to something even darker: the psychology of survival. In a collapse, your greatest challenge won't be the lack of food, water, or shelter, it'll be the mental toll. People don't talk about this enough, but surviving a global collapse isn't just about physical endurance. It's about mental resilience. The truth is, most people will break long before the situation becomes truly dire. Why? Because when civilization falls, human beings fall back on survival instincts, and those instincts are often shaped by fear, panic, and confusion. In a collapse, you'll need to master your own psychology, understand how to stay calm, rational, and focused on the task at hand. There's a powerful piece of science behind this: neuroplasticity. Your brain has the ability to rewire itself under extreme stress, but you have to train it beforehand. The more you practice decision-making under pressure, the more resilient you'll be when real danger strikes. Mental preparation doesn't mean just reading a few survival manuals. It means mentally rehearsing scenarios, forcing yourself to think critically when the stakes are high. This is why military training is so effective. It's designed to simulate the chaos of battle, forcing the brain to adapt and function despite extreme stress. Speaking of stress, let's address one last, often overlooked point: societal collapse. When the fabric of society begins to unravel, it doesn't just mean a breakdown of infrastructure, it means a breakdown of order. As law and order collapse, the greatest threat you'll face isn't going to be the elements or the looters, it's the collapse of your own social structure. Humans are social creatures, and when you lose your sense of community, the entire world changes. Psychological studies show that loneliness is more dangerous than hunger. People will start to turn on each other, and that's when the real fight for survival begins. Understanding human behavior in crisis can give you an edge. When you know how people will react in moments of panic, you can make smarter decisions. If you take anything away from this, it should be this: survival is not just about gathering supplies, it's about understanding the science of survival at every level. From the way your body reacts in a crisis, to how to store energy, to how to keep your mind sharp under pressure. This is the secret science of surviving a global collapse, hidden knowledge that could save your life when everything else is falling apart. And while most people will ignore it, or brush it off as unnecessary, you now know the truth: it's not enough to just be ready. You need to be smart. You need to understand the science of survival. Now that we've covered the basics of survival science: water purification, food preservation, energy storage, and psychological resilience, let's dive deeper into the hidden truths that make or break survival in a world without rules, electricity, or a functioning government. The next critical area you need to understand is the art of shelter and climate control. It's easy to assume that a roof over your head will keep you safe from the elements. But let's face it, most people's shelters are poorly designed for long-term survival. In a collapse scenario, you're not going to be worried about having a cozy house or a space heater. What you'll be concerned with is how to stay warm in freezing temperatures, how to cool down when everything is sweltering, and how to protect yourself from the elements when all systems fail. First, let's talk about thermal insulation. This is a subject most people get completely wrong. Everyone assumes that insulation is all about having thick walls, but the real key to staying warm in a collapse is understanding how heat moves, or, more specifically, how it escapes. Heat naturally rises, and in a poorly insulated building or makeshift shelter, that heat will vanish within hours. What you need is an understanding of thermal mass. It's not about thick walls, it's about using materials that store heat. Simple things like mud bricks, concrete, or stone can actually help absorb heat during the day and release it at night, keeping your shelter warm without electricity or a furnace. It's the secret of ancient architecture, and in a collapse, it'll be one of your greatest advantages. But it's not just about warmth. When the power grid goes down, many regions will be sweltering hot. This is where passive cooling comes in. Without air conditioning, you're going to have to rely on natural airflow, shading, and heat dissipation. The trick: building underground. A shelter partially below ground can remain a comfortable temperature no matter how hot it gets outside, thanks to the Earth's natural thermal regulation. Digging a root cellar or utilizing natural caves can keep you safe from both heat and cold. It's simple, but it's incredibly effective. Again, this isn't something people talk about enough. We're all obsessed with pre-made shelters or expensive survival tents, but the reality is that the Earth itself is your best ally in regulating temperature. Now, let's move on to something more insidious: the collapse of social order. In the chaos that follows a global collapse, it's not just about scavenging food or evading looters, it's about surviving the psychological warfare of a broken world. Human beings are social creatures, and we depend on our communities to feel safe. When that community is ripped apart, people are left vulnerable to their worst instincts. So how do you avoid falling into the trap of paranoia, fear, and aggression? First, understand this: trust will be your most valuable commodity. In a post-collapse world, relationships will either help or hinder your survival. But here's the tricky part: most survivalists believe they can go it alone. They think their stash of food, ammo, and tools will be enough to keep them safe. In reality, they're setting themselves up for failure. Self-sufficiency is overrated. Yes, you'll need to be able to provide for yourself, but you will not survive alone. Humans need each other, especially in a crisis. What nobody explains about survival is that community, not isolation, is the key to long-term survival. You need to find people you can trust. Build alliances with those who have skills you don't. Trade resources and knowledge, but more importantly, create a system of mutual dependence. This is the only way to stay alive in the long run. The most dangerous people are those who refuse to integrate into a network. They'll burn out faster than they realize because survival in isolation is nearly impossible. In a collapsed society, you'll need to understand human dynamics, how to build trust, how to manage conflict, and how to use your strengths to benefit the whole group. But let's be clear, not everyone will be trustworthy. There will be thieves and looters. And knowing how to defend yourself in a post-collapse world is crucial. But this isn't just about owning a firearm. It's about understanding security psychology. Most people think defense is all about guns and ammo, but that's just the first line of defense. The real secret is keeping people away from your resources in the first place. The most successful survivors will be those who know how to stay hidden. Whether that's building a shelter in a remote, hard-to-reach area, using camouflage techniques, or blending in with your environment, stealth will be as valuable as firepower. Think about it: the moment people sense there's something worth taking, they'll come for it, whether that's your food, your shelter, or your medical supplies. But here's the kicker: the longer you can stay under the radar, the longer you'll survive. And while everyone else is out there fighting for the last scraps of civilization, you'll be quietly thriving. Now let's tackle the final piece of the puzzle: long-term sustainability. What happens after the first few weeks? The first few months? A collapse might feel like chaos at first, but eventually, the initial crisis will settle. People will start rebuilding, if they can. But what if the collapse is permanent? What if the world never returns to normal? The truth is, the most successful survivors will be the ones who know how to live off the land in the long term. But this isn't just about growing food, it's about managing ecosystems. Here's something you probably didn't know: permaculture isn't just a farming technique, it's an entire science that's designed to restore ecosystems while providing food, water, and shelter. By understanding how ecosystems work and how to mimic natural cycles, you can create self-sustaining systems that provide for you without degrading the land. A simple example: building a food forest, a layered system of plants that function like a natural forest but provide you with everything from fruits and nuts to medicinal plants. It's about using nature to your advantage, without exhausting the resources around you. In a world where everything else is crumbling, the key to survival lies in building systems that work in harmony with the earth and with each other. When everything else fails, you'll still have these systems to rely on. And that's the hidden science of survival that no one talks about, the knowledge that goes beyond merely surviving and moves into the realm of thriving. So, there you have it. The real secret science behind surviving a global collapse. It's not just about being prepared, it's about being smart. It's about understanding the hidden truths, mastering the basics of survival science, and creating a system that works long after the collapse of everything else. This knowledge will keep you alive when others are scrambling for answers, and it will ensure that you don't just survive, you thrive. The world may collapse, but you don't have to.